Now we're to the removal of internal parts, the guts of the saw, the yoke, the trunnions, the trunnion brackets. So I'm starting here by removing the 5 bolts that connect the trunnion brackets to the cabinet. If I remember right, I think they're 9/16 bolts, but I'm using a ratchet on the top and then a open-end wrench or a closed-end wrench, either way, for the nut on the bottom of the bolt. And you can see there I'm just sort of working my way through there, 1 bolt at a time. Usually the seal breaks pretty easily there. You can see they're coming out pretty easily. Sometimes they're seized pretty well with rust and other things, so you may need to get more creative to get those bolts off, but in general they come off pretty easily. And then obviously I'm just keeping track of all my hardware, putting them over on a table off the screen there. And 1 more to go. And then the internal parts will no longer be attached to the cabinet. They'll just be resting on the cabinet. And my basic approach to remove the parts, as you'll see, just follows a pretty basic order. Next here I'm removing the dust chute. These are slotted bolts, slotted head bolts. On newer Unisaws from the 80s and 90s, I believe they replaced those with hex heads, but for a long time they were just slotted. Okay, so that's removed. Now the next thing will be the arbor bracket and the arbor. So I'm just turning that shaft to get the arbor bracket to a high enough position where it's not captured inside the front casting, the front bracket. And then I'm using the ratchet here to loosen the bolt that clamps the arbor bracket onto the shaft there. And once that's loose, I'm just going to get a hammer and a block of wood, and I'm going to start to hammer that off. Obviously at this point the motor's removed, the belts are removed, so there's nothing, no pressure on that arbor bracket anymore. And then once I get it far enough off, I just slide it off by hand. And so now we're to the removal of the interior parts. I start with the back trunnion bracket, and usually if you lift up from the yoke, and then as you can see I'm trying to get the rear trunnion bracket off of the trunnion that's connected to the yoke. And a lot of times if you just lift up on the yoke, then that rear bracket, you can just, there's enough room to finagle that out and get it off of the machined sort of keyway, or not keyway, but where the trunnion machined area slides and moves. But this time it was stuck, of course. Anytime the camera's on, things go longer. But there you can see I finally got it. And then now I'm holding the yoke, and I'm removing the yoke, the trunnion that's connected to the yoke, off of the trunnion bracket there. And now I'm trying to angle the whole internal guts there by twisting and turning to get that shaft out of that front opening. There it comes. And now the last part is easy, just the front trunnion bracket up and out, and now the cabinet's empty. Okay, so it's all stripped, cabinet's all empty, all the parts are off, out, tags off, and so forth. Now comes the rest of the work. Easy part's over. Probably took about an hour, starting with the motor and belts and all that, and then we worked towards the hand wheels on the outside, and then the internal parts, and got everything sort of set out. Here's the arbor bracket and hand wheels, etc. Some other parts over there, and then some bolts, and then the internal parts and the motor down here. Probably about an hour to completely gut it. And like I said, now comes the hard work though, the cleaning, the evaluating, seeing if there's anything to repair, replace, fix, and then obviously the repainting and lubing and all the things that'll make this good as new again. It's always fun.